Learn English through stories.
Richard Wagner. The Story of the Boy Who Wrote Little Plays. Richard Wagner's day of birth was May 22, 1813. Since that time, music has changed very greatly. When Wagner was born, much of the music that was being written had to follow certain patterns or models, just as architects follow certain patterns in building a house. Now the composer, when he writes music, feels a great deal freer, as he knows that he can make his own patterns, that he is not held in by any such hard laws as those which held back such composers as Mozart, Bach, Haydn, and Handel. It was Wagner who did much to set music free from the old barriers. This does not mean that music today is better than music that was written by Haydn and Beethoven. Indeed, it often is not nearly so good, but it is freer, less held down by rule. When Wagner wrote his first opera that had any success, Rienzi, he followed the models of composers of the day. But when he came to write operas that followed, such as Flying Dutchman, Lohengrin, and Tannhauser, he struck out in new and fresh paths which made him many enemies at first and many friends later. As we read of a great man, we must learn to see the world as it was in his day. Today we think of the world as the home of our parents, of ourselves, and of our friends, as the world of Mr. Edison, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Roosevelt. In the world of Wagner there was not one of these. Wagner's father died when he was only 6 months old, and the boy was brought up by his mother and his stepfather, who was very kind to him. In one way, Wagner was unlike most of the other great composers. He did not show any talent for music until he was almost a man. All that he thought of was writing plays. When he did study, he was so bright and worked so hard that he learned in less than a year more than many learn in a lifetime. When we read the stories of Charles Dickens, we make many friends, and they are among the very best we ever have. There are Little Nell, Paul Dombey, Sam Weller, Oliver Twist, and a host of others. Writers like Dickens bring all sorts of people before us. But few composers can do such a thing. Yet there are some who do this, and one of the greatest is Richard Wagner. In his operas a host of people live, people as real and as interesting as those in the stories of Charles Dickens. There is Walter, who sings the prize song in Die Meistersinger, and Eva, whom he loves. And in the same opera there is Beckmesser, the fussy old schoolmaster kind of a man, and Hans Sachs, the cobbler. There is a lovely scene in the third act of this opera. We see a meadow light and bright in the sunshine. A glistening river flows quietly through it. Everywhere on the water there are boats. Scattered over the meadow there are tents. Everybody is out for a holiday time. All is lively and full of color and bright and cheery. Now there pass before us the tradesmen singing in chorus. There are cobblers and carpenters led by the town pipers. And every trade sings its own songs. Then comes the scene in which Walter and Beckmesser sing in contest. Beckmesser begins. He stutters and stammers and struggles through his song. And finally, like a schoolboy who does not know his lesson, he breaks down. Then Walter comes to sing the lovely prize song, a melody that just sings itself into the heart of everyone. Do you wonder that with such lovely music Walter wins the contest, and the hand of Eva whom he loves? Jolly old Hans Sachs is so happy over it all that he sings a rollicking song, and everybody joins in with him as the curtain goes down. Nor was Wagner satisfied with making characters who were merely people just like ourselves. For Walter and Eva are people of our kind. But there are in the operas by Richard Wagner gods and goddesses, giants and Rhine maidens, and Nibelungs. Many of them have strange names. These names are easy to remember because they are strange. Wotan and Donner are gods. Freya and Erda are goddesses. Fafnir is a giant. Flosshild is a Rhine daughter. Mime and Alberich are Nibelungs. Oh, they are wonderful company, these gods and goddesses, and others of the company who tell their story and adventure in the operas of the Nibelungen Ring. Here is Siegfried forging his magic sword Nahum. Now, as we have said, when we learn of so great a man we always wonder what sort of a boy he was. Well, when this boy was 9 years old he went to a classical school. One of his teachers at least must have been very fond of him, and he must have been fond of his teacher, for when Richard Wagner was only 13 years old he translated from Greek into German 12 books of the Odyssey for this teacher. "I intend to become a poet," he used to say. He read Romeo and Juliet in English. Then he wrote a play in which were Hamlet and King Lear. And there were 42 other characters. All of these died or were killed in the 4th act, and were brought back as ghosts in the 5th. He played the piano, too, and seems to have been quite as busy a boy as he was a man. Children will be glad to know that Wagner was very fond of animals. His favorite dogs are buried in the garden of his home at Bayreuth, where Wagner is also buried. Wagner called his home at Bayreuth Wohnfrei, which really means fancy-free. It is beautifully located in the heart of the old town. Later on the boy read about the contest of Die Meistersinger. He was then 16. And he read, too, a poem called Tannhauser. He kept these stories in mind until he became a man, and then he wrote an opera about each. Wagner also wrote symphonies and a few works for chorus and orchestra, but he is so much greater as a composer of music dramas that he is known mostly for his works for the stage. Vocabulary words: quaint, attractively unusual or old-fashioned. Composer: a person who writes music, especially as a professional occupation. Opera: a dramatic work in one or more acts, set to music for singers and instrumentalists. Patterns: repeated or regular way in which something happens or is done. Models: examples or patterns to be followed or imitated. Barriers: obstacles or hindrances that prevent progress or movement. Operas: a dramatic work in one or more acts, set to music for singers and instrumentalists. Host: a large number of people or things. Fussy: fastidious about one's needs or requirements, hard to please. Cobbler: a person who mends shoes as a trade. Contest: a competition to demonstrate superiority. Rollicking: full of rough or jolly activity. Gods, deities, divine beings with supernatural powers. Goddesses, female deities, divine females with supernatural powers. Giants, mythical beings of great size and strength. Rhine maidens, mythical water nymphs from the Rhine River in German folklore. Nibelungs, characters from Germanic mythology, often associated with treasure. Odyssey, an ancient Greek epic poem attributed to Homer, telling the story of Odysseus's journey home from the Trojan War. Classical, related to the culture of ancient Greece and Rome. Translated, to express the sense of words or text in another language. Der Freischütz, a German opera by Karl Maria von Weber. Oberon, a German romantic opera by Karl Maria von Weber. Fancy free, free from the influence of reality, whimsical. Contest, a competition to demonstrate superiority. Symphony, a long musical composition for full orchestra, typically in 4 movements. Chorus, a large organized group of singers, especially in opera,